Okay, hello, welcome to session 3 of Do Summit Good. Tess, I just want to welcome you to the event. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having
Barbara,
me.
great to have you again with us on the next session. So, Tess, you're going to be talking to us this afternoon about Do Action initially, and very excited about your talk afterwards as well. I'm not going to go into too much detail about Do Action. I'll let you obviously do that. But do you just want to quickly introduce yourself?
So my name's Tess Coughlan-Allen. Some of you might know me because I'm involved with WordCamp Europe. So this year for 2020, I'm global lead of WordCamp Europe. I've also given a couple of talks about Do Action, which has been lovely. So if you've seen some of what I'll say in the brief intro about Do Action before, I apologize in advance. By trade, I'm a copywriter, marketer, communications professional. So I've had a whole range of roles relating to communications and content creation. So that's me.
Fantastic, excellent. Well, I guess let's get started. So as I mentioned, you're going to be talking about Do Action initially. So I'm going to drop out of this and let you get started. So thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So hopefully everyone can see my screen I'm sharing. So to introduce Do Action hackathons are community organized events. It's a WordPress initiative, so you have guidance from WordPress.org if you want to set up your own hackathon. And the idea is to use WordPress to give deserving charitable organizations in your local area their own online presence. So people use WordPress to give charities and nonprofits the tools to share their messages and amplify those messages far and wide. So each Do Action event includes participants from the local WordPress community and outside of the WordPress bubble, if that's suitable as well, digital marketing communities. And those people come together to plan and build brand new websites using WordPress for local organizations in a single day. So for every Do Action, there is a positive and empowering reaction. And I have this slide in the little lightning talk I've given about the Do Action Day we ran in Bristol. The reason is because when we set out on doing our Do Action Day, our hackathon, it was a bit of an experiment for us because there had only been a number of examples of a Do Action Day around the world before that, and it was the first one to happen in Europe. We were testing out the water. We were seeing if we could make an impact doing our Do Action Day, and actually a year later, we got back in touch with the charities we helped, and it turns out that there was a huge ripple of impact around our local community. So really, you can make a positive impact with just one day of work. And as I mentioned, there were already Do Action hackathons happening around the rest of the world before we put ours on. And if you want to create your own Do Action Day, you really have so much support around you to do that. I really recommend exploring this option if you want to give back to your local community and try and uplift the community using your skills. It's very gratifying, and you get to do it with other like-minded individuals who volunteer alongside you. So just for a bit of context, we ran our Do Action event in February of 2018. And at this point in 2018, there were just a few examples of Do Action hackathons that had happened on other continents around the world. And then fast forward a year and a half, many, many, many more have popped up all over the globe. And this is important because it shows that more and more communities are being uplifted with WordPress. And all of this is being done by volunteers in the local WordPress communities. So some stats for you to give you more information about how we ran our Do Action event. It was a one-day hackathon. We ran it, as I said, in February of 2018. We chose 5 charities and nonprofits that we felt were deserving of our efforts, and we chose those based on a few different factors, such as they didn't have a responsive website, or they had no website at all. Maybe they had some serious accessibility problems with their website, and it had to be a registered charity. It's a WordPress initiative, like I said, so we used WordPress to create our websites, which also just meant we had so much more scope to do it quickly and help them, the nonprofits, to use those sites afterwards to push out their content. We looked at organisations in Bristol and the Southwest, and altogether we had 40 people involved, and that included a number of representatives from the charities and nonprofits too. So they got involved on the day so they could work with us and have workshops. So there were 3 workshops we put on as well. Now, the workshops we put on were for 3 different purposes. One was to help the nonprofits understand how to use WordPress, so that moving forward they could interact with their site, they could train other colleagues or volunteers to use WordPress, and they felt comfortable that they knew exactly what they were doing, and it wasn't some scary entity. It was a content management system that they could use day in, day out if they needed to. We also gave a workshop about creating content, and this was really important because we wanted to empower them to be able to share their messages, get more donations, reach the families or people in need, or share exciting events or things they were doing. So making sure that they were enabled to create content and push it out via their site. And then the 3rd workshop was about social media. So this was really focused on empowering them to amplify all of those messages on social media to reach a wider audience, and really make the most of their WordPress site, bringing people back, bringing traffic back to their site so that they could reach their goals, basically. And very, very briefly, I'll talk you through the charities that we helped, to give you a better idea of who we were helping when we put on our Do Action Day. So Bristol Disability Equality Forum was run by deaf and disabled people for deaf and disabled people, and they needed an accessible site, not only to visitors, but on the back end, so that their volunteers who might be deaf or disabled could use the site, and they were empowered to use the site no matter what accessibility needs or requirements they had. Hands in the Air is a grassroots initiative for men's mental health. So they wanted something that was totally approachable and engaging for their target audience. They could really reach out to the right people and help the right people. Caulfield and District Allotments Association had just celebrated 100 years of their organisation being up and running, and so that was lovely. And they had, tons of stories, recipes, tips related to their allotments, and they actually had 70 pages of content that they needed to restructure. Chimpanzees is creating the UK's first fully inclusive leisure facility, and they had nothing, no branding. All they used was email. So they needed a new site that would reach the families they wanted to help, but also funders. Also anything from logo to tagline, they created everything on the day. And finally, Third Sector Solutions, who help people who are unemployed or with service needs, and they wanted to really rethink how they presented those services to their target audience. So what impact did our Do Action Day have? Well, actually, when we reached back out to the nonprofits and charities after 1 year, after the Do Action Day, we found out that thousands of people had access to services that they never would have known about had it not been for our Do Action Day, had it not been for the websites we created and the workshops we put on, which was amazing. And we could never have guessed that we'd have that much impact. It was lovely. But don't just take it from me. I am going to play a quick video, and hopefully you can hear it. But if you can't, there are subtitles.
My name is Laura Welty. I'm from Bristol Disability Equality Forum. I've always been involved in equalities of some kind. I had been an equalities consultant before I became a physically disabled person myself. If you don't have the lived experience, actually, you have no idea. If you're not accessible, in this country alone, it's estimated that the spending power of disabled people is around £250 billion. I was looking for more engagement from people who visited the site. I wanted it to be accessible not only to people visiting the site, but ideally at the back end so disabled volunteers could help us run the site. To be perfectly frank, in our situation, without the hackathon, we couldn't have had a new website. It would have been financially impossible. All I would say is mega thanks to everybody. People were really generous with their time, put effort into understanding what our needs were, and did an amazing job in the amount of time they had available.
I'm Stephanie Wee. I'm the founder of a social enterprise called Chimpanzees. 84% of children with disabilities can't access regular leisure. This causes obviously problems with health and well-being for the children, but then also the families, because the child can't get out, the families can't get out. We are working towards opening the UK's first fully inclusive leisure facility for disabled children and young people. Until this happens, we are setting up pop-up leisure centres. We had our first one last summer, which was really successful and exciting. We had 1,100 kids through the door, and we had some amazing feedback with one little 3-year-old boy who had his first ever laugh. This initiative is amazing. It's hugely important, and it's been incredible for us. It's been really pivotal for us. If we hadn't had the website, we wouldn't have been able to do the pop-up, and without doing the first pop-up, we wouldn't be able to continue doing the others that we're doing. It's the difference between people being able to access our services or not. In a small way, change people's lives, and that wouldn't have been possible without our Direction Day.
Okay, that is me done talking about Do Action. So before I go on to give my talk about resetting your professional moral compass, I think a couple of the WP&UP organisers are going to come on. Hey Dan.
Hey, thank you so much for doing that. I think there was just one question actually that came out from that session. So firstly, Do Action, a fantastic entity. Thank you so much for bringing the first one to Europe, I believe, was it?
Yeah.
Bristol? Yes, yeah. So thank you. There was a question from Topher asking, was the Do Action inspired in any way by the Give Camp? Do you know?
I don't know, but Hugh Lashbrook from the WordPress community, I think he's a community manager or something. He created the first Do Action Day. He created Do Action, or it was his vision at least. And so he'd be the person to ask how it was inspired. But I know that, yeah, he created the first one in South Africa, and he's been pivotal basically in sharing this initiative, and he's sort of a mentor that helps people put on their own Do Action days. So whilst I don't know what his inspiration was, and it may well have been Give Camp, I think you said. Yeah, he'd be the one to ask. So we'll have to reach out to him after this is done and find
absolutely. Out. Yeah, so we've got similar initiatives. So the 48 there's another similar entity doing a similar. So yes, there's some fantastic work going on. I just wanted to give a quick mention that the next one's actually in Beirut on the 7th of December. So it's 4 days time. And then the next one after that is in Perth on the 18th of January. So if you visit doaction.org, you'll find more details on upcoming events and, of course, the ability to potentially host an event. But now I'm going to hand you back to Tess and giving a talk, resetting your professional moral compass. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you. So, as mentioned, I'm going to talk to you about resetting your professional moral compass, which sounds very deep and very preachy, but I'm going to try and make it with the purpose of giving you ideas, provoking some new ideas and some new thoughts about how you could change the way your business runs, or how you could feel that your professional environment and your moral values are more aligned, because I think that's extremely important. So first of all, what we're going to do is a little thought experiment to take us back to how we thought the world would be when we were young, which is very sweet. And then I'm going to provide some context about my early career and what changed for me when I started working in the WordPress space, as well as my next steps. And then we're going to be working through some tips for resetting your professional moral compass, some things to think about, and some brand examples of businesses and organizations that are doing it really well. So first, our little thought experiment. I want you to think back to how you viewed the world when you were a kid. The influence of TV shows and films helped us to think of the world in terms of goodies and baddies. So what did you want to be? Well, a lot of us did want to be baddies, but that's okay because play helps children to make sense of a very complex world around them. And in our early lives, we're also asked what we want to be in terms of profession when we grow up. So what kind of job did you want to have? Did you get there? Maybe the job didn't exist at the time. I know that's probably very likely for many of us working in the digital space. But as a professional, I want you to think about whether the world looks and feels how you expected when you were a child. And there are still goodies and baddies in the business world, right? So have you ever wondered if you're working for the good ones or the bad ones? Now, even if you're working for the good ones, there can be probably a whole range of improvements and alignments made to make sure that your business or organization that you represent is on the right path, that you're doing good. Unfortunately, the harsh reality is that sometimes we'll be exposed to businesses that we fundamentally disagree with. And sometimes we'll observe business decisions either from an employer or a partner business or some agency or organization you know very well that make you feel uncomfortable. And that's an awful position to be in. I remember in my very early career, I saw an agency purchasing advertising space for a charity, and they negotiated huge discounts based on the fact that they were working for and representing this charity. But then I observed none of these huge margins that were made going back into the charity's bank account. They all went to the agency, and the charity knew nothing about this. And obviously this is awful. It's extremely uncomfortable to even know about. And I raised my voice, but I was young, I was inexperienced, and felt totally powerless. Now, a few years later, I told this story to someone who was in a position of power, not related to the other organization, but the CMO of one of the world's biggest internet hosts. So CMO is Chief Marketing Officer. And I told her this story, and she said, some people are going to make money in the business world and some people aren't. And you're in the second category. So I thought for a long time that I am not right for the business world. You know, the skills I know I have and that I knew I had even from a child, like communication, empathy, and imagination, they all fit with marketing and storytelling. However, and actually, sorry, even as a teenager, I had teachers joking with me that they'd see me on The Apprentice when I was older, which is hilarious now that I see the type of candidates that go on The Apprentice. But anyway, I was feeling like I was geared for business until, unfortunately, the harsh realities of the business world weighed too heavily on me. I realized, of course, that it's essential for a business, any business, to make money, and that the bottom line is priority number one. However, I thought, based on what I'd observed, that if your values didn't fit with the business, so what? You know, from what I'd seen, your professional moral compass was your own problem and you could like it or lump it. Luckily, later in my career, I've had amazing experiences. I've been working for some really great companies. So the next step after that, I went and worked for a non-profit. And I saw people doing really great work in an effort to reach important global goals. Then I worked for a startup and I started to get engaged with the WordPress community. And I saw people all over the world contributing their time and their skills to making WordPress better, making it stronger, more secure, private, accessible, and basically doing this for 35% of the internet, which is incredible and mind-blowing. So I looked at the WordPress sort of ecosystem and I could see businesses that were successful, that made lots of money, but contributed time back to the community. And they sold products, some of them released free products. It showed me a group of people and business owners that ran successful businesses, but still cared. And that's something I hadn't seen in my early career, people that cared. So then I ran Europe's first Do Action Day, which I spoke about earlier. Like I said, it's a hackathon where volunteers use WordPress to create new websites for charities and nonprofits. And as I mentioned, after 1 year of doing the Do Action Day, I got back in touch with those nonprofits and discovered that thousands of people had gained access to services that they would never have known about without the websites we created and the workshops we delivered and the tools we gave them. So I've been lucky enough to give talks about the Do Action event over the last year. And I can even call myself an international speaker now from talking about this topic, which is just such an unexpected growth opportunity. It's brilliant. But the point I want to make is people want to hear about it. And that's because people care. Again, people care. And that's a far cry from my first experience of the business world. So when we think of the goodies and baddies in business, these days I'm certainly finding myself in a safe space with many of the good ones. But I've been talking about myself now for ages. Just before we move on to the tips, I want to talk a little bit about the wider context and the circumstances of the world today. So I want us to think about why moral business decisions are important for right now. Okay, we're approaching 2020. 2019 was the year when Greta Thunberg addressed world leaders at the United Nations at just 16 years old. Imagine that. It was the year when children and then adults took to the streets to protest as climate strikes rippled all over the world. 2019 was 2 years after the Blue Planet 2 shone a light on the plastic crisis, and it was a time when consumers had started to take note of the organizations that were doing their part to combat the climate emergency and saying no to those who weren't. Where I live in Bristol, just a few days ago, many people boycotted Black Friday and instead gathered outside City Hall for Green Friday. So they're taking back control of what was Black Friday. And many ethical brands are making a statement about Black Friday and about mass consumerism. And I've even worked with an ethical fashion brand recently who donate all of their Black Friday profits to a charity specifically campaigning against sweatshops. And they've done this for the last few years. They've even done this for years without even talking about it on social media, which as a content person, I said, no, you must talk about it. It's amazing. My point is, just like consumers are saying no, businesses can say no. So all of this context, the story about me and the context about the ecosystem, the climate, the circumstances of the world today, these were all seedlings that have led me to create FORAGE. So just a quick note about FORAGE. This is the brand that represents my freelance copywriting and content strategy services. And it's my ambition to write for brands that want to do good. Brands that want to change the world, brands that are ethical, sustainable, and create social impact. Those are things that drive me and make me passionate. So I want to align myself with those brands. And whilst I'm at the very beginning of this journey, I've spent a while thinking about this and working up to this point. So what I want to do is share what I've learned from others, as well as my own experiences so far about resetting your professional moral compass with tips that you could bring into your own business. So we'll dive into the tips. Sustainability. Does your website run using sustainable, renewable energy? I've just set up my new website and mine does. And actually, it's easier than you think. Lots of web hosts out there will be able to provide green energy for you to power your website or your client's website. But of course, that's just one element. There's loads more you can do. Specifically in terms of WordPress agencies, WordPress companies, you're thinking about your website first and foremost. You know, there's stuff that you need to do, such as check if your website is fast to load. Does it use the least amount of energy it could? You know, Google will reward you for this, but it also, you know, so it makes good business sense, but it also benefits the environment. You know, simple things like making sure your images are compressed, making sure that the load time is as little as it can be. And then outside, actually I should mention that there are some great speakers talking about this topic in the WordPress space right now, including Hannah Smith, Abatha Kaur, and Tom Greenwood. They've probably got slides online or talks online that you can look up, and they have some great advice. And those three are in the UK WordPress community. I know that there's people in the global WordPress community who'll be talking about creating sustainable websites. And I really recommend looking some of them up, because some of these people are experts and they can tell you so much more than I can. But of course, there's other things you can think about in terms of sustainability. Could you cycle to your office instead of driving? Next time you need to travel to a client, can you take a train or a bus? There's so much that you can think about. Is your office run by renewable energy? Could it be? These days, it's really not a blocker. Renewable energy is the way forward. And I really recommend you take an honest review of how sustainable, how green your business is, and make some small but achievable movements forward. Okay, ethics. So many of you, like I said, in the WordPress ecosystem, your businesses rely on the internet, and most of what you do is online. Your products might be online, so instead of like tangible physical products, your products are made of code. So that's different to what many other businesses around the world will face. But I'm going to use the example of physical, tangible products. And to help you think about this, if you are an agency or a WordPress business that goes to WordCamps, do you give out swag at events? If you do give out swag, and anyone who doesn't go to WordCamps, they're WordPress conferences, and swag is usually some sort of branded gift. Well, from what I've seen recently, most sponsors giving out swag are now trying to choose sustainable swag, choose like genuinely useful swag. So not just throwaway items, not just wasteful. However, there's more that you can think about than that. So if you purchase swag for a WordCamp, who are your suppliers? If you know who your suppliers are, do you know what working conditions they provide for the people who work for them? Are they treated right? Are the workers paid fairly? It even goes as far as, are the working conditions humane? Now, you might think, well, of course they must be, but actually, there are sweatshop catastrophes that happen where buildings collapse and thousands of people die, and they're really sad and really awful, but most of the world doesn't seem to notice. So where do you stand on this point? And I'm not intending to be preachy at all. It's more a chance to think this through. And next time you purchase something, maybe you'll take a second to think about where your suppliers are and how they treat their workers and whether they empower their workers. Next up is partnerships. So, do you agree with the businesses that you partner with? So when you think about partners moving forward, think about how they treat people in the world. Do they see the importance in areas like accessibility, like privacy? Do they discriminate, or do they treat everyone equally, like they should? Are they as polite to waiting staff as they are to stakeholders? You actually have the power to choose who you want to work with. And it's important because who you align your business with reflects on you. So it's not even just for your own moral compass. It also relates to how your brand is represented. Think about PR. Are you aligning with businesses and partners that you feel proud to align with? I think that's a really important thing that I don't hear talked about. Okay, social impact. So social impact is the effect an organization's actions have on the well-being of a community, usually their local community. So for many entrepreneurs and businesses, running an organization that creates good social impact is really important, it's vital, but it's possible that not every organization has thought about it. So now I want you to take a moment to think about the organization you work for or the business you run, and think, what does your business do for the world? Now, if you work in the WordPress space, it's possible that you have contributors who work for you, and that's amazing. That's a really great start. But there's probably more that you could do as well. And I don't necessarily mean more time spent donating your time and contributing. It could be small changes that can make a really big impact. So hiring a diverse team, working harder to bridge the gap between different social segments. That can be really important and really valuable. And I mean, we heard in the Yoast Diversity Fund, it doesn't just help, it's not just about social impact, it's about benefiting your business. Diverse thinking is beneficial for you. Diversity is a professional advantage. So Doing your part to improve representation can also come down to small things like how you choose the stock images for your website. Do they represent people of different ethnicities, of different genders, of different abilities? And on top of all of this, you can do actual direct social outreach. You can donate money and time to charity. There's so much you can do to improve your social impact. And it's not just gratifying, but also, you know, it will make hopefully your team will be proud to do it as well. So it's good for retention. Okay, an honest internal review, which is probably like the trickiest one, because you have to face up to problems. You know, you have to be really transparent about what's wrong in order to set things right. So if you're a business owner, you have an obligation to review how your business is running. But anyone who works within your organization has a right to look closely at how the business runs as well and have their say, have their opinion. So what I recommend for this is think about if there's anything that you'd be embarrassed to share with a friend about the business you work for or the business you run. These are massive red flags. If you feel like you couldn't have a chat about it, or if you had a chat about it, it'd be negative, that's something you need to address. So I say, you know, don't delay and voice your opinions, but always voice your opinions constructively. You don't want people just lighting fires everywhere and running away. You really need some positive solutions so that you can start putting wrongs to right. Because to be honest, we always need to change in business. We need to adapt in business, and we can't all be right the whole time, but we can make progress and we can have a commitment to doing better. That's what I think is the most important. Okay, so that was, you know, related to having a voice, giving your team a say. So let's say you're approached by a potential client that has a history in a controversial area, for example, oil and gas, but are moving to a more renewable energy source. So you can review that and you can see the progress they're making, and you can choose to support them if it's right for you, because you want to support them on this journey. What you can also do, which would be really, really lovely and courteous, is to give your team a say in this. So if you have a big enough team, you can allow people to refuse projects. That shows that you're listening to them and that you value their opinion and that they are more important than the project, which I think is really important. As long as, if you're able to, if you've got a big enough team, I think that's really, really a great thing you can do. And related to this, related to giving your team a say, is having a voice yourself to say no to clients. So if you don't have to take every single project that comes your way, which I bet you don't, but some people, you know, that's a scary thought, turning down a project, but, you know, I'm going to say you probably don't need to take every project, then you have the ability to choose to work with businesses that share the same ethos as you. Businesses, again, that you're proud of, that you agree with, that align well with you, that you want to work with. You can do yourself justice and do your business justice. Okay, so I want to just say something about virtue signaling. This talk, firstly, it's not meant to be preaching. It's meant to be thought-provoking, which I've said a couple of times, but I just want to stress that. It's also not about virtue signaling. It's not about how good you are, and I'm not suggesting you indicate you are kind and decent and virtuous if you're not. It's strictly about the sincerity. So some context. Virtue signaling is a phrase that was coined in 2004, but made popular from an article in The Spectator a few years ago. And that article defined it as saying you hate something as a veiled way to say that you are morally superior. So, oh, I hate vegans, or I hate meat eaters. It's a veiled way to say you're morally superior. Right, so online, especially on Twitter, there is a lot of angry accusations that happen, outing virtue signaling, trolling, basically. And this is particularly common if there's a political undertone. And so that's basically some people accusing other people of being hypocrites. And what they're really saying is, you don't mean that, you just want to look good. And actually, quite a lot of the time when people accuse other people of virtue signaling, that in itself constitutes as virtue signaling. So it's a really, really ironic and complex set of circumstances. And I can see why people would be worried about being called out for virtue signaling. So my recommendation is that as long as you are sincere and your good work is not done for vanity, including brand vanity, then you are on the right track. It should never be about vanity. It's never a tick box exercise. It's because you believe in it and you know it's right, and you should always be sincere and have integrity. So Now, after that little message, I want to talk about some of the brands, give some case studies, some examples of people who are doing it right, businesses that are doing it right, so that we could learn something from. Okay, so first I'll talk again about sustainability. The case study I'm going to mention is global, but it's also close to home at the same time. So I want to give a shout out to the BBC's Natural History Unit. It's based in Bristol, and not only do they create absolutely incredible shows that bring attention to the natural world, to climate issues, to the impact that humans have on the environment, but they also focus on improving sustainability in their own day-to-day work. So, for example, they use a TV production carbon calculator to identify and track the impact their activities have on the environment. So imagine all businesses tracked and acknowledged their environmental impact. That would be amazing. We'd be able to see exactly where to improve. We could isolate that. We could understand how to be more energy efficient. We could look at where we use our resources. We could look at where we waste our resources. We could be less wasteful. It'd be really, really cool if more and more businesses had a really transparent way to track how they use their energy and make steps to improve that as well and be more sustainable. Second is FORAGE design. So I talked a bit about FORAGE design earlier because that's the client that I mentioned who donates all of their Black Friday profits to charity. So for the example of ethics, I'd like to mention that client FORAGE design. So they are an ethical fashion and jewelry brand that campaigns for conscious choices when it comes to consumer behavior, and also campaigns for workers' rights. So they're very open about their views, and they even say on their own website that fast fashion is wasteful, that it causes damaging carbon emissions and exploits workers in the supply chain. And instead, they work with artisans and tailors around the world who handcraft their products, and they empower those people who make their products. They empower whole communities in northern India, and they care about who makes their products. They care about the people in their supply chain, and the founders of the company actually go and meet all of the individuals who handcraft their products, and they pay them fairly, and they campaign against the use of sweatshops, which is absolutely amazing, especially if if you consider the fact that they work in the fashion industry. This is outstanding. But they're not the only example. There's many ethical fashion brands and sustainable fashion brands that are doing really, really great work because fast fashion is really damaging the environment. So in terms of business partners, I thought rather than mentioning an organization, I'd like to mention a whole movement. So of course, you'll all remember the hashtag #MeToo movement. And for this example, I want to talk about the entertainment industry. Me Too was a global movement, and it gained the most exposure because of high-profile individuals in the entertainment business. And this included victims of sexual assault, as well as perpetrators, of course, who were very well-known people in the entertainment industry. So when we think about business partners, this is an example of how it can go terribly wrong if you work with people who do bad things. So many people working within that industry would have known about the perpetrators and the problems. They might have even known full well that some of their business partners were at the core very bad people doing awful things and harming other people. So I just want us to take a minute and think about the fact that when we represent the brands we work for and the decisions we make on behalf of those brands we represent are very important. So every decision you make on behalf of your brand, every partnership you make is on behalf of your brand, and it reflects on your brand if those business partners are no good. So you have the right to choose not to do business with someone who you know for certain is harming other people. I mean, it sounds like a no-brainer, but it's not a no-brainer. When we look at the Me Too movement, we can see how much people can get away with and how much things can be swept under the carpet, but we can also see how terribly things can unravel. And it's not just the perpetrators who are noticed. It's the people who kept quiet or did business with them. And really, we should stand up for what we believe in and not work with people who are awful. It sounds stupid. It's that simple. Okay, on a more positive note, I'll talk about social impact in relation to IMDb. So again, an example from my local area in Bristol, IMDb wanted to hire a more diverse workforce. And they didn't just cross their fingers and hope that this would happen. Their development manager did a lot of outreach, which was really amicable. So one of the things they did was reached out to a women in tech group I'm part of called Women's Tech Hub. And Women's Tech Hub helped them review the language they used in their job adverts to ensure it was inclusive, no rock stars. You know, they made sure that the terminology was going to be just right to reach more, to be more appealing for more diverse audiences. The hiring manager then attended a co-working session, or more than one, I believe, with the Women's Tech Hub, where there are a mixture of femme folk, some employed, some looking for new opportunities, some recent grads, and also some people who are looking for returnships. So perhaps they'd been taking some time out to care for their families and they were ready to return to work. And at one of those sessions, he gave a talk, he hung around, he made himself approachable, he answered any questions on a casual one-to-one basis. And for any organization, that's achievable. I think that's a really achievable thing, but it goes a long way, especially if you're trying to hire a diverse workforce. And then on top of this, IMDb collaborated on some free training with the Women's Tech Hub. So they donated loads of film data for a free course that looked at big data and AI. And so they showed not only that they cared about developing their potential hires, they showed that they cared about contributing to developing, big data and AI for women in tech. They cared about anyone and everyone who wanted to learn about AI and big data, which is amazing. And they were really involved with that. They went and were involved with presentations talking about that scheme after as well. Okay, GoDaddy. So we've got speakers from GoDaddy today as well, which is really cool. And I think GoDaddy is a really good example of a brand that has done an honest internal review. So some people might remember how they might have presented women in old adverts they used to have a number of years ago. And I think it's fair to say they made mistakes, but they've changed their ways. So their adverts in the UK, at least, are now absolutely brilliant. They're funny, but they're not offensive. Some even subvert gender stereotypes in a really interesting way, but they're always delivered with a feeling of substance and integrity. And also on a personal note, a few years ago, GoDaddy gave some scholarships to half a dozen women in tech, bringing them in partnership with Campaign magazine, bringing them to Cannes Lions, which is the world-renowned international festival of creativity. And basically, it's a C-level event, and it's really, really, really high profile. And it costs a lot of money to go, and it's amazing if you get the chance to go. And I was lucky enough to win one of those scholarships. So I saw firsthand how they invested time, a lot of cash and energy into the next generation of women, ensuring they got a seat at the table, helping them pave their own future. And I think that's extremely admirable. And I think if any of you come across the GoDaddy team at WordCamps around the world, you'll see firsthand how fantastic and caring and the modern brand that they've created for themselves. It's really great. Okay, so giving your team a say. For this example, I'm going to talk about a product design company called Kinner Dufort that's, again, based in Bristol. And this story was mentioned during a panel discussion I attended at an event. So basically, this product design agency were working with Shell. And this was very controversial for them because as an agency, they say no to industries they disagree with. They won't work with tobacco, with weapons, and usually with oil and gas. So their project with Shell was actually related to implementing charging points for electric vehicles all over the country. And so that's great, but this was a difficult decision for the agency because they agreed that their client was taking steps to improve sustainability, but they wanted to listen to their staff and not force people to work on this project if it made employees feel uncomfortable. So they gave people the option to work on this project or not, and they respected their team's decision. So they still, they took the project, they thought this is, environmentally friendly, it's a movement forward, but you don't have to work on it with us if you don't want, and we don't mind, and we don't judge you, which is amazing. Finally, when we talk about saying no to clients, and I want to talk about Whole Grain Digital, because they wrote, that's an agency, a WordPress agency you may know of. They wrote a blog post about a major client project they turned down. And the blog post is called Having the Guts to Say No to Bad Money. And it's related to a political lobbying project that, when they weighed it up, was too problematic for their business values. And it takes a lot of courage to turn down money, but it feels good to align your business values with your morals. So very admirable, and you should go read the blog post. So very quickly, next steps, you could start reaching out to like-minded people and brands with the same ethos as you. If you're thinking about who your next employer could be, you can reach out to companies you feel you're on the same wavelength as, and start building those relationships based on your business, your professional moral compass. If you're looking to hire, again, think about what your future staff might want from their employer. You know, what are they going to be looking for? This is particularly relevant for millennials, because, you know, stats show that we care less about money and more about aligning our business values with our moral compass. If you're looking for your next client, look for one that makes you proud, would make you proud to share in your portfolio. And if you own a business, don't forget that you can create one that you're proud of. You have that ability. So finally, the most important advice I have is, with everything you do, always have integrity. And that's everything I've got to talk about today. So I'd love to answer some questions if anyone has any.
Hi, Tess. That was great. Thank you very much. A lot of what you say, I agree with wholeheartedly. Having kept a lot of these things in mind with WordCamp London.
Yes, I learned a lot actually from WordCamp London as well. You had brilliant initiatives there, yeah.
The idea of looking to see who is providing the swag, who are we buying from, and making sure. It just takes a bit of thought, you know, to just have a quick look and see. So that's very good. Let me see what questions we have for you.
Okay.
Let me see. I've got one here. What would be the number one thing that you can do to start aligning your professional world with your personal values, would you say?
Okay, so for the first step for aligning your professional world with your moral values, I think what you can do is start writing some notes about what is important to you. So that could be like I've mentioned, sustainability and ethics. You know, you might not go as far as that. You might have something that's, you know, diverse teams, that's very specific, very relatable. So start thinking about what's most important for you, and then make really small achievable steps to achieve that. So basically you're setting out a goal relating to your professional moral values, and you slowly and surely start making steps to achieve those goals.
Okay. And obviously not all of us are self-employed. If you are employed, how would you actually approach the subject with your employer, would you say?
Yes, this is a really good one. And I think this also relates to things like when I mentioned an example of having images that are representative, like say if you choose stock images or you create graphics, make sure they're representative. That I find can be a very difficult one to talk to sort of business owners who are a bit out of the loop about. You know, it's hard to make people understand the importance of that, even though it's incredibly important. So I think the first thing you can do is approach it with care. So rather than saying, you're wrong, you're doing this wrong, it's awful, have a little bit of care, tread carefully in terms of being polite, explaining the reasoning for what you're about to say. You know, I think this should be like this because, and I've got this to back it up. You know, here's some research, how it's going to benefit our business. And this is why it's important, like morally, this is why it's good for business goals. So I think if you have some careful thought about why a decision is going to benefit the business, but it's also going to benefit the moral values of the business, I think that can go a really long way. So I would say, rather than shouting about everything that's wrong, you want to say small but achievable goals to make it right, and try very hard to be careful about the way you present it and ensure that, you know, people understand the business goals behind it.
Okay, I don't have any further questions for you here at the moment. Lots of people enjoying and saying thank you
Ah, lovely. Thank you.
through to us. So it's a good topic to actually just think about, that we all need to actually, we can all make a difference. Um, so you, my eldest says, "Oh well, it doesn't make any difference," and I think yes, it does.
Mhm.
Just small things. If we all, are just a bit more aware. Um, then it will change. It will, we will reach that tipping point and change will happen.
Yeah,
So
and I think it's important that people feel empowered, that they can create a career for themselves that they feel proud of and they agree with, and that they don't have to work for the bad guys if they don't want to. And I think especially at the beginning of your career, that seems like, you just take whatever opportunities you can get, and you think you have to get on the business ladder, but actually you can make smarter decisions, and you can help lobby as well, and you can help make business you work for change the way they do things. And that's really, really powerful. You can be really, really powerful, even if you're just, even if you think you're a cog, you're not a cog, and you can make tangible, genuine difference, which is really, really amazing when you think about it.
if somebody comes back and says, well, why don't you want to work with us or something, you can just say,
Mhm.
I'm not comfortable with this, and they may not realize. So it could be educational as well, I suppose. So
Absolutely.
um you
Yeah.
know so what next with Do Action, would you say?
So if you are interested in Do Action, you can visit, I think it's doaction.org is the
Mm,
URL. And you can look at, I think we mentioned at the start, there's future events on there, and neither of the next two are in Europe. They are, I can't remember where they were, but they're elsewhere around the globe, if I'm correct. And but
yeah.
you can look at the ones that have already been. You can look at past events and see if there's one that was local to you. If there is, you can probably find out who organized it and ask them some honest questions about how to run one, and maybe you might even want to run one yourself.
How much time did it take to actually set it up, would you say, compared to a WordCamp, say?
So, I mean, it did take longer than I thought, which I think is always the case, always the case. But I would say once everything's in place. So the way it works is that you organize, you decide you're going to do it, then you reach out to charities, and you get the charities to apply, and that takes a lot of effort, because you might want to reach out to the local media, local press, to get the word out. You might want to do some research yourself and reach out directly to charities, and get them to apply. And only then, once you've looked at the charities that have applied, when you've accepted the ones that you're going to move forward with, only then can you reach out to volunteers. So it can be a little bit frustrating the way it works, because you need to get so much done before you even know if you can deliver it with all these volunteers. So after all of that, then you reach out to volunteers, and also you have to fill some gaps. Sometimes we couldn't find enough content creators, even though that's what I do, and I was like, no, how can I not find these people? But then we reached out further into the digital marketing community, sort of a little bit on the edge of the WordPress bubble in our local area, and that really helped us to fill all those volunteer roles. And it ended up that we had not only filled all the volunteer roles, but everyone turned up, and that's the difference between a
Oh, that's amazing.
yeah. If you think about a WordCamp or a WordPress event, especially a free event, so often you get, I don't know, 10%, maybe more, not turn up. So we were really, really pleased that we had like 100% attendance, because it was such an important, high pressure day that we were running. Yeah.
That's WordPress people for you, isn't it? That's,
Yeah.
all quite awesome and amazing. Anyway, Tess, thank you very much. That was really inspiring, and we really appreciate you joining us for this past hour. So we'll let you go and have a break and everything, and then we'll be passing on the hour to our sponsorship talk, which is going to be quite interesting. So Tess, thank you ever so much, and I shall close this down in just a moment, just to remind you all that we've got our donate button just further down, and the proceeds from all of this will go to all of the organisations that are being featured through the day. So this isn't just for WP&UP, it's just an idea that we had about 3 weeks ago and thought, what can we do on Giving Tuesday? And between three of us, we said, yes, we can do this. And we're doing it, so that's really great. And thank you to all of our speakers who are coming in. So I shall stop whistling away now before Dan pops on and notices and tells me off. And we'll see you on the hour.
And I'm back. Thank you so much. Are we still going? Are we still live here, Barbara? Yes, we are, aren't we?
We are still live, yes, because I don't know how to turn it off.
Tess, Tess, I see has dropped off, but thank you so much. That was a fantastic talk. Again, really excited for the next session. We have got a number of company representatives to have a conversation about the state of sponsorship within the WordPress space. So please do join us. If you are able to, please, sorry, as we start the new session, do remember that you just will need to refresh. Ooh. Sorry, I think I might have speakers from the other session you can hear. Sorry,
no,
if
we
you
can't.
No, okay. Please remember that as we go into the next session, you'll just need to refresh the browser if you are on wp&up.org/live. We will be in that session in about 3 or 4 minutes' time. So look forward to seeing you on the other side. See you shortly.